Hello, and welcome to another episode of In Bed with Books. I'm your host, Melissa, and today we are joined by author Jayne Ann Krentz, who recently published The Shop on Hidden Lane. Jane, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, because it gets complicated. Some of the people listening in may know me better as Amanda Quick, and some may know me as Jayne Castle, but it's all me, Jayne Ann Krentz. And I've been writing for a while, as we know we will probably get into. And the current book, The Shop on Hidden Lane, is the one that's out now. And I would just like to add that there's a dog in it. There's a whole audience out there for dog books, and I would like to grab that audience.
Yes, yes, I am also part of that audience. Can confirm there is a very adorable dog in this book. I say adorable, he is several times referenced as a hellhound, but still adorable. Um, okay, can you talk a little bit then about you said you've had a long career with this. How did that start? How has that gotten to where it is now?
Well, I grew up on Nancy Drew, so I was probably doomed to write romantic suspense. It's just I can't write a book without a murder in it. Wouldn't know where to begin, wouldn't know where to end. Um, but I have always loved the relationship story that has a happy ending. I think the romance genre, I fell into it because it's the most optimistic of all the genres. And I think I, for one, go to fiction for a renewal of optimism and the archetypes, which are foundational to our culture's value system. Uh, I'd like to see them reaffirmed, and I think a lot of readers do too. And we do that through fiction. Most of us know what a hero is, and how do you know that? You know that from fiction. That's where you learned what a hero is supposed to do when the chips are down. And I think it's important. That's one of the most important roles that fiction plays in our country, is to keep those archetypal values, those heroic values alive. And but that said, within that, of all the genres, romance will always be my favorite because of that relationship, which is at the heart of the story. And I write romantic suspense, and I would clarify that by saying I think it is its own genre. I think it's its own thing. And the way you would know it or not know it or recognize it in a story is if you're reading a book and you could take the mystery part out and still have a solid story, it's probably not romantic suspense, it's romance.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, you could take the romance out and still have a logical mystery story going, then I would say it's a mystery with a romantic or love story on the side. But with romantic suspense, it moves, both elements move in lockstep. Every twist in the romance changes something in the plot, and every twist in the plot changes something in the romance. It affects the connection is ongoing throughout the whole story. And I think that's what makes it unique.
Yeah, and I liked that in this book. I don't try to get into too many spoilers when I do author interviews, so I guess something early on in the book that's clear is that Sophie and Luke are main characters because you kind of switch between points of view with them. They have, even though there's this history of the feud between the family, which by the way, I loved that element. But they have this kind of weird connection with their auras, even though she's very talented and he seems to think he's not quite that talented. So I also want to hop back really quickly to something that you said early on about the function of fiction in terms of like showing us heroic archetypes and kind of instilling further hope. I will say there was definitely, I feel like a comment being said here about billionaires and the kind of tech industry that works without like any kind of like the recurring Frankenstein theme of I asked if I could, not if I should kind of Jurassic Park quote. Um, how intentional was that going into this, or was that just because it's a theme that you like to work with? How did that come out in this book?
Well, the tech thing, I think, is just we're swimming in it right now. I
Yeah.
mean, so it's just out there in the universe. It's easy to draw on for a plot point because everybody can relate. they know what I'm talking about instantly, and everybody's got the same concerns and the same issues. Um, and we, as human beings, seem to have always been playing with fire, literally
Yeah.
from one generation to the next. If it's not the atomic bomb, it's the AI.
Yeah.
We play with fire. It's what we do, and we often get burned. So it makes for an ongoing universal plot element, I guess you would say, sort of like a murder.
Yeah.
You can stick it in.
They're inventing new ways all the time for us to rewrite that with a different elements, different vibes, whatever you want to call it. Um,
Well, I think the
okay.
Frankenstein, your use of the Frankenstein imagery is right because that is our what's the right word I'm looking for? It is the thing we always face in this.
Hmm.
Every generation has a new version of their Frankenstein to
Yeah.
fear, and this is right now. I mean, I can tell you right now, every author I know is terrified of AI.
Yeah, I will say from the reader side of things as well, there's a frustration with certain authors' sudden willingness to use it. If we want to call them really authors, I don't know that we could. That's my opinion. Um, but yeah, it's interesting that if we want to talk about like AI as tech bros dealing with things they don't need to deal with, there's the fact that when, AI was theory 20 years ago, it was like, well, it's going to do all of your errands, it's going to fold your clothes, it's going to drive you to work. And now it's like, actually, it can't do any of those things, but it can replace art. And
Yeah.
so I found it interesting in your book that a kind of theme here also is that the Trent, the billionaire who has this art colony, actually kind of hates art.
He's he's in it because it's his way into the technology that he does love. Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess, in a way you could say the tech is his art. That's his art. I mean,
Yeah.
where's your definition of art end and stop and end? But I think what people are really trying to do is figure out where creativity actually comes from.
Hmm.
So we like to tell ourselves, well, it comes from humans. We're the only ones that can create. Um, but that gets messy
Hmm.
at the outer edges. It gets very, very dicey. Um, we'll see where it goes, but it may go nowhere. Sometimes we get afraid of these things, and then it turns out, for example, back in the 1930s, people were actually terrified of or worried about. I don't know how terrified they were. They had bigger things to worry about in the 1930s, but it was a real concern that robots were going to take over the jobs. And that fear has, we've still got elements of that. And this
Yeah.
is kind of the latest iteration of that, I think. Because an AI is kind of a robot
Hmm.
it's the latest version of a robot. And we've been in fear of robots since at least well, maybe even earlier, the 1920s. I think when they first started worrying about them. So,
Yeah, I recently read Babel, and I found out through this book that the Luddite movement wasn't even really about like anti-technology. It was about the fear of technology taking over a craft. And so you could argue that goes back even to the 18th and 17th
yeah,
centuries.
that's right. Because the machines were the early versions of the robots.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So
Exactly.
so then I want to talk a little bit about, you've been in the industry for a long time. How has that changed over time? We talk about machines. It hasn't always been AI. Sometimes it's been helpful robots. How has that changed? I guess it doesn't have to be technology robot based, but
Well, it is, I find it a lot easier and a lot faster to write on a computer than I ever did on a typewriter. And I cannot imagine doing a whole book by hand the way
oh
people
no.
used to do it. That was just, I don't know, that seems like overwhelming. So yeah, take advantage of it where it works. But I do think the biggest change in the industry from the author's point of view was indie publishing.
Hmm.
When I first started out, that was not an option. It was New York or nothing. There was no way to self-publish. And that has sparked a whole new kind of publishing. And with it have come books into the sale available for sale that would never have seen the light of day 30 years ago,
Yeah.
for better or for worse.
Yeah.
It's not always a positive thing, but it is out there. So that's huge. And the other huge thing that really changed the market was the invention of the ebook reader.
Okay.
So those are the two factors that really changed the way we know publishing today. It's a much different world than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah. I want to point out, you've got a few pen names. You've written like dozens and dozens of books.
Don't go there.
Yeah, oh, sorry, sorry. You can humble brag a little bit. You can enjoy it, but I you
How did I keep
mentioned,
going?
well, yeah, actually, how do you keep going? Like the scope is changing, and you mentioned, of course, that like there's certain books nowadays that wouldn't have seen the light of day even 10 years ago. And again, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. I think we have some, in some senses, expansion of genre.
Mhm.
And in other senses, as you get out to the edge of what that expansion looks like, it does kind of peter out and like get a little flimsy.
Well, I will say that romance has always been the most experimental of the genres.
Yeah.
And for years, that was simply true because nobody cared enough to make rules. There's
Okay.
Seriously, the critics just dismissed it. So we were sort of free to do what we wanted. And if you could get it published, that was, and that's still true. So the result is a lot of experimentation, which doesn't happen nearly as easily in, say, the mystery genre, which has
Yeah.
some pretty firm conventions. And if you violate those conventions, you are not a mystery writer, and you will
Hmm.
not be accepted as such. Same with science fiction, which divides itself into the fantasy element and then the hardcore sci-fi type stuff. There's rules for both sets there, and it's just it's true of all the genres that there's sets of conventions, but in the romance genre, they have always been more fluid.
Okay.
And I think
I
that's one of the advantages of writing in it. And it's one of the ways I've kept fresh.
I like that, especially I want to pin that for a second because I've got multiple English degrees, hence, a podcast where I talk about reading. In my undergrad, I got into an argument with a professor because he was, shitting on the romance genre. I've been reading some degree of romance since I was very young. Um, Thank you to my mother, who, by the way, is a fan of yours.
I'm
So, hi, Mom. But he is a big fan. This professor was a big fan of mystery. And so can we talk for a second a little bit about, you say that if you step too far or even a little bit outside of the conventions with mystery, it kind of falls apart. But why is romance a little bit more fluid?
Well, because as I said, people don't make the same rules. But I think it just attracts writers who are trying to tell a relationship story in new ways. And when you're writing a mystery, that's not your goal. You're writing to illustrate something else. Maybe the noir mystery is a classic example of a kind of mystery. You know a noir book when you see it. as as the joke goes, the difference between a an American police procedural and a British police procedural is that in the British police procedural, the cops are the good guys.
Oh,
But
okay.
in the American noir, we've pretty much invented that dirty cop story.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that speaks to our distrust of authority and, just a kind of an American thing. Um, and that dark side is kind of an American thing, which it's interesting because Americans are also a very optimistic people, or traditionally have been a very
Hmm.
optimistic people. Like even in the 1930s, um, when I was doing a set of Amanda Quicks that I set in the 1930s, as rough as things were, I mean, they were between world wars for crying out loud, and everybody knew there was another one coming.
Hmm.
And yet, and there was the Great Depression going on. People had really suffered. And yet there was this great belief in the future. It was going to get better. It was, that's an American thing. It's going to get better. It's
Hmm.
our fundamental optimism is reflected in our fiction to a large extent, but most especially, I think, in the romance.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. And I think part of that is because the United States, while the country is not young in terms of the land and who's been here, of course, the United States of America itself is very young. And so
Yeah,
kind of creating our
still in bed.
own mythos through that fiction.
Yeah,
I've seen people argue that like Marvel and DC are our own version of trying to create like Arthurian legends for the United States,
with the
which I could
Frankenstein,
buy.
with the
Yeah.
Frankenstein edge. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I could, because every culture needs its myths and legends.
Yeah.
Um, and writers tap into those. It's kind of an interesting process because when you think about it, for any decade, pick a decade, any decade, 1930s, because I worked there for a while I didn't work there. I was not born in the
Yeah.
1930s,
Yes. Yes.
but I used the background. There are multiple myths associated with the 1930s. There's the myth of gritty survival in the face of the Great Depression. There's the myth of bravely getting ready to fight another war. Um, there is the myth of Hollywood with the glamour
Hmm.
and the fun stuff, all the exciting things from Hollywood and stuff. And as a writer, you can tap into any of those. And there's lots of stories there. But I do think that fiction's fundamental job is to carry the myth. And as a writer, you pick the myth you want to carry forward. I don't know how I got started on that topic, but myths. Oh, myths, yeah.
Yeah.
So, so, um, so the Marvel comic thing is actually it is a very American myth when you think about it. The flawed character who is has to do the right thing when the chips are down,
Hmm.
regardless of his flaws. He has to overcome them long enough to save the dog,
Yeah. Yes.
save the kid, save the kitten, um, save the world. That's an American thing.
Hmm.
And I think those are valuable. That's a valuable, I mean, that's a good goal, save the world.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think those myths are important for all of us.
Agreed. Agreed. So I want to bring it again back to the book. Sorry, I go off on tangents, and so,
So do
I-
as you notice.
yeah, it's working. It's working. Um, so there's this recurring, um, I don't want to say problem in their connection. So Sophie and Luke, the main characters, the romance side of this. First of all, Luke is hot. I'll just like I'm not even gonna try to pretend that he's not. When you described him as like dressed head to toe in black, I was like, all right, this is it. He's mine.
You can't go
Uh,
wrong dressing the hero in black. I always,
oh no.
which is
Uh,
which is interesting because in the old westerns, in the old black and white westerns, the hero always wore the white hat. That was one of
yep.
the things. Color of clothing matters in characters, I think.
It does. And well, she constantly like she's like, well, since he's obviously a CIA assassin. Um, and so I think there is kind of, obviously we've had decades, but the shift towards actually, I guess you could argue if we go back to the noirs and even when you brought that up, I was like, well, yeah, obviously it's always a PI because he
Because
doesn't have to follow.
yeah, doesn't have to follow the rules. Another
Yes.
American thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh. And
And
that comes, I think, out of that Western.
yes.
The good guy rides into town, cleans up the town, and then walks off or rides off into the sunset.
Yes, like Tombstone, very classic example. Like one of that is arguably a quintessential American myth, but it's also very much based in fact. We've just Hollywoodized it for our own, you know, pleasure.
Yeah.
Um, but if we're looking at who's the good guy, who's the bad guy based on costuming or whatever, he doesn't have to. He's part of private security. He's part of some, mysterious agency that he keeps referencing, but Sophie doesn't actually know what this is, and she's like, "You're gonna have to at some point tell me what this is." Um, and so I like that even though we trust him because of the obvious immediate connection, there is still this level of like mystery and secrecy, and he is kind of human, but also he has these secrets. How
I,
did you decide then, like the archetypes that Luke and Sophie were going to fill?
I think I always go back to the same archetypes.
Okay.
Fundamentally decent people, honorable people, people who will do the right thing. But that's not what it's top of mind for them. They're not thinking about that. What they're thinking
Mhm.
about is I've always got two things going on in my books that I realize go back to the very beginning of my career. And I think every writer has a core story, and that core story has nothing to do with the fictional landscape. It doesn't have to involve vampires. You don't have, oh, it doesn't have to involve science fiction or it doesn't have to involve small towns or anything like that. The core story for a writer is focused on the the fundamental emotional conflicts and themes that she or he is called to go back and explore again and again and again. And for me, those two conflicts are the issues, the risk of trust. We all have it every day. We take the risk of trust every day, and it's a huge risk. And
Mhm.
especially when it comes to relationships. Um, and my characters are always, for whatever reason, in the process of having to reinvent themselves. And so I think reinvention and trust are the two elements I go back to again and again. Um, and I like to set things on the West Coast because I grew up on the West Coast. I know the West Coast, and to me, it feels like we're always in the process of reinventing out here. Um, my characters don't have 5 generations of family background on the East Coast to anchor them. They're on their own for whatever reason. Even if they've got a family, they're on their own, somehow on their own devices. Um, so that process of reinvention leaves me always wanting an entrepreneurial type character, someone who's going to go out and make their own way in the world. Um, and that, and but I'm still dealing with reality, so I've still got a librarian and a corporate corporate director there. So one way or another, those things take on an entrepreneurial air or experience for me when I'm writing them.
I like that. And I guess feel free not to answer, but do you have a theory as to like why those are yours or why other authors or writers pick their
I,
themes?
I don't. They're really from deep down, and I mean, I guess I could go back and analyze my childhood or something.
Okay.
But I think everybody's got similar. I think the reason they work is because they're universal.
Hmm.
Everybody can relate to the issue and the fear of trust, the risk of trust. If you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, I've made a few bad judgments along the way, trusted the wrong person at
Hmm.
this point in my life. I mean, we've all been there and done that. Um, and the reinvention thing, I think, is universal because whether we know it or not, we're doing it. And
Hmm.
it probably pays us all the time. Every day we reinvent ourselves. And we probably should pay more attention to it because that gives us agency. When we
Yeah.
recognize it and have a word for it, it's like, yep, I could change today. I could do something different today. I can change myself today. That's again the optimistic side of romance that appeals to me. Um, and I think that those elements are just universal. And there's not, I mean, if you stop and think about it, the reason it's good for an author to recognize, figure out her core story, and a lot of people, and for an example, besides mine, there's redemption. A lot of people have a redemption story. Another core story that shows up a lot is found family,
Hmm.
very popular right now. Um, the coming of age story, which is very big in romanticy, at the moment, but
Yeah.
it's always there somewhere in the genre. It's just, got a different label. Um, those are core stories. And the thing is, you can write your whole career intuitively and never have to worry about it. But it's good to know what your core story is in case you have to find a new job.
Yeah.
Um, I have killed off more than one career, more than one writing career. And what enabled me to survive in the business was knowing my core story and figuring out where else to go with it. And a classic example is when I invented Amanda Quick. At the time, I had just killed off my first version of my um, futuristic romance, is what it came to be called, science sci-fi romance or whatever you want to call it. I
Hmm.
had just killed that off with 3 books about 20 years ago.
Okay.
By the time I realized that I had no career left as Jayne Ann Krentz, that's when I was forced to realize, what am I really doing here? What am I really writing? And I realized that what I was really writing was this kind of marriage of convenience story. Two people, forced proximity, have to work together in order to survive.
Hmm. Sounds familiar. Yeah.
And that can go anywhere. And
Hmm.
but the male female element, the romantic element, really took me into Regency, the Regency romance, because women really did have to have to get married for various reasons of convenience.
Yeah.
Um, and that story just it was a natural for there, and that's when I built the Amanda Quick books.
Okay, I love that. And I guess looking at Luke and Sophie's non-relationship, since they refuse, he's very adamant at first. He's like, "We're not doing a relationship here. I just need you for this job." Which of course progresses, and within like 4 or 5 hours, he's like showing possessiveness and everything. Um, but I love that because there are moments where I'm like, "You just met him like 48 hours ago."
Timelines are critical.
Yes.
Timelines in my book are always a problem. And ask anybody who writes romantic suspense, and they have the same issue because by the nature of the plot, things have to move fast.
Yes.
And since you're moving the romance at the same rate as the plot, you're kind of stuck with sex on page 60. I mean,
I mean, I'm not complaining. I also, I mean, I think you do a really good job of pushing the fact that every time they kind of come up against the distrust with each other, it's immediately like, look, we don't have time to actually argue about this because B and D are gone. We have no idea what's going on. We have no clues. We don't know where to start. And so they have
yeah.
to keep working together until eventually it's like, well, obviously we're partners. And they're like, yeah, we're colleagues. And it's like, that's the relationship. Like, sure, sure it is.
And that's the only thing I can build a believable love story on is that trust, the leap of trust is what
Hmm.
it is. That both characters are willing to make it and the commitment that goes with it. Um, and they do that after they have seen the hero in each other. And I think that's an important element for not just me, but it is for me, but I'm sure it is for a lot of other writers. Um, you don't just see that they're good looking or sexy or
Hmm.
attractive, but you see the hero in the other person. And that's what gives you the fundamental respect that you can build everything else on. And I think that's part of what makes romance work.
That's quite possibly the best thing, my favorite thing that I've heard in any of my interviews. So thank you. That was beautiful. Um, yeah, I love their dynamic because of that, but and I think it's not just that they see it in each other, but they help each other recognize it.
Well, they don't necessarily see they're not thinking I'm a hero.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just their nature to
Hmm.
there's that underlying core of honor, and honor is very important in genre fiction. We don't talk about it a lot in real life. I mean, we talk about it in vague ways, but we know what honor looks like because of fiction, just like we know what heroism looks like because of fiction.
Hmm.
And and that sense of honor is a key when we see it. people acting dishonorably, it really bothers us.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the excuse is. You're not supposed to do that. And that sense of honor is, I think, just very critical to the core of genre fiction in general. And when it's missing, we don't like the book. We don't
Yeah.
like we don't like the character.
Well, unless it's like genre specific for some reason, that is like the black hat in a Western. Like it's indicative of an untrustworthy character and that
Yeah,
whether they're narrating or not is a big red flag
yeah.
for readers. Um, okay. So I kind of want to talk about your writing process because of your very prolific, but totally, it's chill, it's whatever. But your long career, how does that look for you? You've mentioned kind of, grasping onto specific archetypes and themes, but what does the actual practice look for you for this kind of output?
Well, I will say that having the three worlds, the three fictional landscapes, I write romantic suspense no matter what I do, but I
Mhm.
do it against three different kinds of backdrops. The historical backdrop for my Amanda Quick name, the futuristic backdrop for my Jayne Castle name, which happens to be my real name, by the way. I
Okay.
man I managed to sign that away accidentally a few years ago. Um, and the Jayne Ann Krentz name, which was my married name, and that's what I use for contemporaries. So even though I'm drawn to the same kind of core story, being able to put that story against three different fictional landscapes, the futuristic and the historical and the contemporary, has really kept me refreshed as a writer. So when I come out of one world, I'm eager to go into another, um, because there's plots I can do in one world that I can't do in the other,
Hmm.
especially if they involve technology or something like that. Um, and I can set rules. Like in the futuristic world, I get to write my own rules for the way the culture functions. Um, and the set of rules for the regencies isn't, as we all know, much different from what we have today.
Yeah.
So those landscapes are even though they've caused me trouble over the years in terms of the difficulty of building a brand under one name, which is why I advise new writers going out there. My PSA for the day, if you're my public service announcement, if you are an aspiring writer, don't use pen names. Pick one and stick with it because in this modern age, the problem of building three pen names with social media is just going to overwhelm you.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was curious about that. Yeah, just
But
so that has that shifted? How is
today, after all the years I've been writing and after all the social media, if I go into a signing today, I can guarantee you that at least 30 people in the audience will say, "Well, I never knew you wrote as Jayne Castle."
yeah.
And the reason, but the reason behind that is actually, I think, even more interesting because the reason behind that is because a lot of readers will only prefer to read certain fictional landscapes.
Hmm.
They want the fantasy world landscape, perhaps. Maybe they want the Regency landscape. Maybe we are attracted to certain landscapes and we hesitate to read outside those, or most readers hesitate to read outside those landscapes. So the reason they haven't discovered me as Jayne Ann Krentz is because they don't read contemporaries.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's yeah, the answer is there, um, which speaks to the importance of landscapes. That's a whole other issue. Process wise, so getting back to process, so the process wise, yes, having the three worlds is invigorating. It allows me to think fresh when I come out of each world. In terms of practical day-to-day stuff, um, I think the idea that comes first is the conflict. You know
Mm.
what? Um, so in this case, he is in a community of people who have psychic talents, most of whom have psychic talents. His whole family has psychic talents, and he doesn't, or at least he doesn't think he has psychic talents. So
I find that an interesting part if we kind of harken back real quick to the like they see the hero in each other. She's very adamant. She's like, this is not like a normal. He's like, no, this is just how I am. And it's like, well, yeah, you could say the same about her and her talents.
yeah,
And
yeah,
she's not dismissive.
yeah. Well, so so elements like that, and then the family feud, that
Hmm.
was a fun thing to work with. Um, and then the fact that they're stuck together. They have to work together out of a sense of familial duty,
Hmm.
responsibility. They have a they have to make this work because they've got a duty to their relative to their ancestors who's made this pact that binds
Hmm.
them together. Um, so against regardless of how they feel about each other, they're going to carry this out. They're going to go through with this. So those were the emotional elements that I was playing with, and the fact that neither one can fully trust the other.
Yeah.
And yeah. Um, and that they're both in the process of reinventing themselves. Like I said, he's decided he was really isn't cut out for the corporate world, but his family is saying he is.
Hmm.
Um, and and got a real pro she's got a problem with her image. I don't know how else
Yeah.
related to her talent, her psychic talent,
Hmm.
uh, has pretty much put the kibosh on all of her relationships. Put it that way.
Yeah, and I would say that like she has valid reason to feel frustrated, if we want to call it that, by the way that this plays out for her. But also I do actually really enjoy, in a kind of sick way, I should be clear, but like the Vincent's what we discover of her failed experiment.
So,
Um, just because I feel like that, like a lot of women can relate to that fear of, oh, this was just like essentially a really bad date. And 3 months later, he's stalking her. And, this art shows this level of obsession that is like quite terrifying.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a
That
very fun element of the book for me.
we have a lot of fun with obsession and
Yeah. Yes.
yeah, no, I think it's important when if you're going to give somebody psychic talents of some kind, I think it's important to recognize that with any talent comes a bright side and a dark side. Um, and I just think that's true of anything, any kind of talent, that literally there's going to be a dark side to your talent and a light side to your talent. And it will attract some weird people,
Hmm. Hmm.
is kind of where I was going with that. Because people are fascinated with the dark side as much as they might admire the light side. There's kind of a weirdness there. But I also think that in my case, the characters have control over their talents. And I think that's
Yeah.
another important thing that's important to me. Um, my bad guys often are attracted by the lure of power to the point where they'll take that one step too far and do something that puts everybody at risk, including themselves, because they can't resist the power
Hmm.
it's just such a huge driver for human beings.
Yeah. Even Trent, who initially seems to be our bad guy in the book, he reminded me of, there's that, I can't remember if he's a millionaire or billionaire, but he's always trying to like bioengineer himself, and he tries, like all meat diets or blood transplants from young men. And
Yeah,
so the reveal of his goal really just seems to be longevity.
yeah,
I was like, oh, that's actually like that is kind of pulled straight out of real life.
that's kind of a thing.
Yeah.
When have human beings not been interested
Yes.
in longevity? Yeah,
Yeah, like a lot of this, we talk about the themes, kind of goes back to the human's fear of like death or an end.
yeah,
Even Vincent's, when we get that POV from him and we learn the basis of his issues is he's convinced that Sophie is responsible for him not being able to make art. I will just say that part. Um, and so even for him, like all of this, his like almost like destruction of himself is
yeah,
ironically because of a fear of an end, of a destruction that he can't even see that he's already done it to himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I don't want to put somebody off the book. It really is a fun book.
It is. It is a really fun book. I really like I found all of these it's such an interesting look at humans, and I think that's one of my favorite parts about fantasy and sci-fi in any period because it gives us a kind of new way to explore human experience.
Uh-huh. Well,
Um,
and that's one of the reasons I like dealing with the psychic thing. And this is probably time for me to do another public service announcement. My books often get labeled paranormal, and that's fine because technically speaking, they do have a paranormal element. But those of us who know the romance world or know genre world know that the word paranormal has come to incorporate the supernatural, witches,
mhm.
vampires, werewolves, that kind of thing, magic. And
Yeah.
I'm not doing that kind of paranormal. I stick with the psychic thing because it's still a real thing for humans, at least we think it is.
Yeah.
Uh, and it allows me to do things with the connection between the characters and the relationship that are fun to work with. And also it works plot wise because the US government and the Russian government and who knows what else, um, back in the last half of the 20th century and
Yeah.
perhaps still doing it, poured millions into psychic research. People have taken it really seriously for decades to the
Yeah.
point where the CIA was opening up all kinds of investigative programs to research the possibility of creating psychic spies, and things that could control people's minds, psychic psychic elements. LSD was a factor for a while in serious research for the military. Um, and it was all about trying to tap into what everybody want is convinced is there, some kind of latent psychic talent that we could get into. And for me, that's the story is takes it just one step beyond intuition. And everybody thinks they've got intuition. Everybody probably does have intuition. We may not pay attention to it, but where's the dividing line between intuition and the psychic? It's right on, there's an edge there that we can't really pin down. And that's what makes it possible for me to take that little leap beyond to make it a part of my character's real world
Yeah.
without without going into the supernatural. They're not they're not magicians.
Yes, and I also I would I guess kind of agree with the distinction being made here because I have a hard time when it's like paranormal and then it's like Twilight. I'm like, okay, but I wouldn't really dictate like vampires and werewolves as paranormal. But I guess I should also like if we talk about, psychic the potential for psychic abilities, that's also what drew the interest and was the root kind of influence for Stranger Things, which
Uh,
was this world phenomenon. And, in the last few years, papers and classified documents have come out showing to some degree that like these experiments were real. And regardless of, individual opinions on them, clearly the CIA had like a vested interest or some kind of,
millions went down that water hole, or
yeah.
I don't know what you call it, rabbit hole. Yeah, I think the only reason it got canceled, and we don't know for sure that it got canceled, right?
Hmm.
Um, was because it came to light in the newspapers, and the Congress was embarrassed
Yeah.
to be funding psychic research,
Yep.
the woo-woo thing. Um, but that doesn't mean they're not still doing it.
Yeah,
So
and there is like I don't want to say evidence, but it's more like lack of evidence of an ending, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
That
and
anyhow makes for great. When I open up the plot cupboard for psychic stuff, it just comes tumbling out. I mean,
mhm.
I don't even you can't make this stuff up. Like,
Yeah.
trust me, anything you can think of, they thought of.
Um, and I do like that that's also kind of an element of the book is you have her other ex failed experiment, Mac, and he watches it happen. And granted, he to some degree does not have the same abilities. And Sophie theorizes that he has some kind of heightened intuition, but he
Cop
watches,
intuition.
pardon?
A cop, a cop's intuition.
Yeah, yeah. But even he's like, lying to the precinct or to other cops about her involvement. And even though what he said was like low key vile, he's like, well, you said you didn't want to like be involved. And it's like, okay, but she also didn't say like insult me and ruin my reputation in the one small town that I grew up in.
Exactly. Because he's trying to have it both ways, be able to use her talent, but not acknowledge that he might believe in the psychic thing that, and he keeps rationalizing it to himself.
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
just, he's just a very good observer.
hmm I think to some degree, there's this similarity between him and Vincent in that he wants to use her abilities to help further his career, help him solve these cases, reinforce what he thinks he already knows. And Vincent wants to use her as a muse for his art.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned earlier, like the way you said something about Vincent's, I guess we can just like call it psychosis, deterioration, is this like want to own or like this power hungriness. And I think so often, and I won't say it's specifically a gendered thing, but I think it can very much be a gendered thing more often than not, is, Mac is attracted to Sophie because she's awesome, but he wants to possess that. Luke, on the other hand, sees the value in her, sees that, he's not afraid of the power the same way that others have been.
I think that's a key word. If I look back on my books, I realize every hero I've ever written is the reason he stands out from past dates is that he's the guy who's not afraid. He's not afraid of her strength,
hmm
and in fact, he's attracted to it.
hmm
He's not in fear of it, and I think a lot of women in reality spend a lot of energy tamping down their own strength or
Yeah.
making it unobservable because they are aware that the opposite sex can be afraid of it. And
Yeah.
so I'm always writing about the guy who isn't the real hero.
Yeah. The
The
way
one,
hotter one.
yeah. And that comes down to that mutual respect thing.
hmm hmm With the Mac Vincent thing, Vincent very clearly more than once says like I'm going to control her power because he doesn't understand how it actually is, like what's actually going on. Um and I think to a smaller like they're basically like we see the two different versions of how does somebody respond in fear. One person tries to hide it and tries to just like be smaller. It's okay, just be smaller for us. And the other
Yeah.
one's like, actually, I'm gonna possess and destroy you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
very fun to explore.
it is. It is. And I think it's something people can relate to. Most,
Yeah,
as I said, especially women. When I look back, I have lately decided, and I don't know why, it's just I just started thinking about it, but maybe because I'm suddenly become aware of how much I love the Gothic novel, which has
yeah,
become a thing recent years. I just love it. And I realize it's probably the Gothic novel is probably the foundational text for romantic suspense.
yeah.
It puts the woman at the heart of the story. It puts her in jeopardy. And in the end, she's left having wondering if she's going mad, questions her
hmm
sanity. That goes back to just calm down. You're overreacting.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the gaslight thing and being trapped in a claustrophobic environment that you can't escape the house
hmm
or some version of the house. Um, the claustrophobic vibe, and then not knowing who you can trust. Um, and that's the Gothic, and I just love it, and I think it fuels me it fuels my own storytelling, and I think it always will.
Yeah, I love Gothic novels, the Gothic genre. Um, if you had to pinpoint the one that like influenced this the most, what books or books would you say?
Oh gosh, there's so much good Gothic stuff being
Yeah.
written out there
Yes.
now. I love Simone St. James. And one of the reasons I've always loved her is because there is that respect for um, the the male soldier under the surface, the wounded hero kind of thing. Um, and and she's the one that sees the hero in him and he sees the hero in her. I love I love that. And she's not afraid to go into the supernatural. She does ghosts brilliantly.
Hmm.
I don't do ghosts, but I love to read them. Um, I have actually just read a interesting book that's coming out next week called The Vermilion Sea
Okay.
by Megan Chance. This is a Gothic set in the 1920s. The claustrophobic environment is a yacht, a fancy yacht owned by a very wealthy man and a crew, and he's determined to set sail to go into the Sea of Cortez to hunt for specimens, fish, wildlife in the sea that are, this is the 1920s and people are still learning, well, aren't we? We're still learning,
Yeah.
still identifying specimens, yeah. And she's the lone scientist on board, and of course, she's a woman in a man's world, very much so in the 1920s. She's a biologist. Um, and so there's a bunch of characters on board. You don't know what their real motives are. She's surrounded by them, her against the world, including an ex-husband or an ex-boyfriend that she doesn't know if she can trust again. And
Naturally, yeah.
and they pull up the wrong specimen, and
Okay.
people start dying on the boat, and you can't get off the boat. So, so it's really it's really an interesting way of doing the Gothic that I think people, if you're interested in that, I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I wrote that down because creepy sea is right up like that. The sea is my scary, like sublime spot for me. So yeah, I've added that to my reading list.
yeah, yeah, Megan's a great writer. I think you'll enjoy the story. This is
Awesome.
yeah. Um, in terms of the futuristics, another gothic version of it really inspired me back when I was in high school, late high school. Was Anne McCaffrey's, before Anne McCaffrey did the Flying Dragons and Pern and stuff like that. Um, she wrote like two or three gothic-y sorts of stories, really gothic stories. One of which was called Restoree, and it was the first and only futuristic romantic suspense I had ever seen in my life. And it was very gothic-y. And, for 20 years, I kept trying, I couldn't publish it successfully. I could not write a futuristic gothic. Um, and now I can, but but my inspiration, I always will never forget that story. It was like the book that really said, this is what I want to write.
Nice, nice. How do you like what are the elements of futuristic Gothic? Because when I think Gothic, I do think, at least in the past, to a degree. So I'm curious. I've never read futuristic Gothic.
Yeah. Well, it's a world building thing. Basically you have to set up a world, and that's what I've done with the Jayne Castle books that has its
Mhm.
own rules. And then fundamentally, you're looking at the same issues. They're just, like I said, these issues are universal. You can take them into any world that you want to. And so a futuristic world works just as well. You just set up a new set of guidelines for, maybe they can't get off the spaceship.
Oh yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
People start dying. Maybe they can't get off the planet in time. I mean, there's just it's more about the relationships that define it rather than the background, the
That's
futuristic
fair.
background.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
So she took a kidnapped by aliens story and dropped her on another planet with a new face and a new problem. And she finds herself working in a hospital for the what would you say for the, not the demented so much, but as people who can't take care of themselves out in the real world,
Yeah.
an asylum kind of situation. And the guy she's assigned to care for is actually being drugged. That's why he's showing all the elements of being not there anymore.
And that's also kind of classic asylum twist too. I like that. I like that.
So she basically realizes what's going on and helps him escape from the asylum, and then adventure goes on from there. But but yeah, that asylum setting and the wounded hero who she brings back to health in one way or another, and those are great elements. I realize my books usually have that element of healing in them.
Hmm.
Um, and often the woman is the healer. Not always, but often she's the one with the gift to um, bring somebody back from the edge, or you know, help them recover whatever it is that has gone wrong in their lives. I think that mythology of the healer is another universal
Hmm.
uh, universal theme that people respond to, no matter what world you put it into.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about that, and also, you see it exaggerated with Trent, but the play of light in this, it's very obvious with the art colony and with with the work that Trent's doing, and then you get a little bit with Luke's talent, which he thinks isn't enough to qualify as a talent, right?
It-
But also, so I live out in Arizona, and part of
ah,
this book is set in Arizona, and so every time he's like it's the desert, and she's like, why do I need another water bottle? But light is a big element here. It's terrifying that they're in this space, but it's almost more eerie that they can't get to a space without artificial light, and I love how you played with that and played with like it being kind of weaponized by Trent to help himself and to hurt others, or not even necessarily, yes, and to some degree hurt others, but also to confuse or to just whatever he needed for his own gain, which I feel like is at odds almost with some of the what we expect from the Gothic. You expect dark, you expect not to be able to see, but in this, they can't see because the light is obstructing their abilities sometimes.
oh, it gets in the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
The light thing was interesting to play with. The physics of light are just fascinating. I
Hmm.
don't pretend to have any understanding of them. I just move. I sort of walked on top of that one, which is a common a common bit of research. A common way to research is kind of skim the surface. Um, but but it's the physics of light that make it so easy to actually talk about the paranormal as if it's a real thing, because we do know that light goes off the spectrum. We do
Hmm.
know we can't see all the colors that are out there. Um, and we do know there's lots of energy waves of radiation that we don't understand. I mean, look how long it took us to figure out gravity.
Yeah.
Even when we're right on top of it.
Yeah.
Um, so it's easy to project the idea that there's certain bands of bandwidths of light that have power, what would you call elements that we don't yet understand and could be used harmful for good or for ill. Um, Depends how you use them.
Yeah.
And uh, radio waves, things like that we never knew existed 20 a century ago, are now taken for granted and stuff. So light makes for and wavelengths of energy make for a fun way to come up with bad bad things happen in the
Yeah.
wrong light. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way you played with that as, a narrative element, but then also just kind of as this recurring motif within their adventure. Which again, I feel like I talked about, the really dark side of like Vincent's deterioration and the evil at hand, but also it is such it's a fun romance. Every time they like decide to trust each other, I got like a little giddy and
Oh, good. Good. Yeah,
Yeah.
because the relationships, no matter what you're writing, it's the relationships you remember.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers the plot, except in the vaguest kinds of terms, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose some people read for plot, but everybody I know, it's the characters you remember.
Yeah.
And
Because the
that's what,
plot isn't good if the characters aren't good.
yeah. And fundamentally, there aren't that many plots.
Hmm. Far
Uh,
more people than there are plots.
yeah. And everybody's going to react differently. So
Hmm.
that makes for endless writing
Yeah. Yeah.
inspiration.
I I wish I would love to talk more about character with you, but we're just about at our time. I wanted to ask, and if it's, I feel like you might have answered it, but if there's only one book that you could recommend to anybody for the rest of your life, what book would that be?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know where to start. Um, yeah, I suppose I'd go back to Restorie
Yeah.
by Anne McCaffrey.
Was that the book that,
Good luck finding a copy.
oh, true. Was that the book that got you to decide that you wanted to write, period?
Yeah, yeah, that's the one.
Oh, that's,
That's the one that influenced me. I I was a reader, but I didn't
mhm.
think about writing until after I had. Well, what happened was I read the book and then couldn't find anything else like it.
Mm.
So that's when you start thinking, well, maybe I'll write my own.
And that's the classic thing, isn't it? If you can't find the story you want, write it. Write the story you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how writers get into it. And I think all these years later, that's still the motive. I'm still looking for my twist. It isn't that I think I can do it better than anybody else. It's just that I want to do it my way.
Yeah.
And then hope like heck that I can find people to get into my fantasy with me.
It seems like you have been. You've been doing this for quite a while.
Oh, it's been great. It's been great. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, congratulations on this one. This is on shelves now. I don't have the physical copy. I'll like put like the cover right here in post. Do you have it with you?
Okay. Yeah. What writer doesn't have a copy of their own
That's
book?
true. That's true. Yes. Yeah. Gorgeous cover. Speaking of the play on light, that is,
Yeah, they did a great job. The publisher has a fabulous art department. This is
yeah.
Berkeley is my publisher and love the art department.
Yeah, gorgeous book. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining me today. Is there is there anything that you want to say, anything you want to plug here at the end, anywhere that readers can find you?
Oh, you can find me online at JayneAnnKrentz.com, Jane with a Y.
Yes.
And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, but to be honest, I pretty much suck at social media. So
Well, the perks of traditional publishing is that you don't really have to worry about it all that much.
don't expect anything too exciting when you go to my, my Facebook page.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you everybody for listening and or watching. Have a great rest of your day and happy reading. Thank you for joining me for another episode of In Bed with Books, a bookish podcast for bookish babes. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of the latest updates. And if you have any suggestions for authors, books, or topics that you want to hear about on the podcast, then feel free to DM me on Instagram or shoot me an email. I'm wishing you a lovely rest of your day, and until next time, happy reading.